Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Can I just start off with my usual check? So could someone tell me in the chat whether you can see me, hear me, and see my screen, please? Thank you very much. All right, we'll just wait another minute or so for any latecomers, and then we'll get started. Okay, should be long enough. Okay, so welcome everybody. So this webinar today is named E-commerce Configuration within Infigo. It'll be around about 1 hour in duration, same as always. And the format I'm going to actually take for this one is very similar to the last couple, where I intend to sort of go through quite a lot of topics at quite a high level, just to show you what the software is kind of capable of in this area. And if you're familiar with Infigo, hopefully it will give you a couple of new things you weren't sure of before or didn't know existed. And then I'll also provide you with the page that I'm showing on screen at the moment, which gives you links to additional content should you wish to follow any of those topics up in more detail. So I'm joined on the call today once again by Duncan, who will be manning the chat. So as always, if I'm just talking away and not looking at the chat, you can still ask any questions in there. Duncan will be taking a look at that and answering anything you've got with his vast wealth of Infigo knowledge. Okay, so as I mentioned, e-commerce configuration in Infigo is quite a broad term, and it's just trying to focus in on some of the areas to do with e-commerce. So things such as shipping or delivery, different payment options that we have available, email messaging, and that kind of thing. So then we'll break it down into different bits of functionality. So first of all, let me give you the link to this particular page, which has all the extra links on it as well. This will still be available after the webinar if you need a frame of reference. And that just it's not a very interesting page, I've got to admit, not many pictures. However, I'll be going through each of these topics in turn, and then there's additional content on most of those entries where you can see additional content in the Academy. Right, so let's start off with addresses, or address books more specifically. So obviously a big part of your customer's ability to purchase from you is the ability to choose what address they want it to go to. So the easiest way of doing this, as I'm sure most of you know, even if you're quite a basic Infigo user, is that you can apply addresses to customers. So within their actual customers entry within customer management. So if you need to do this as an administrator, there's an addresses tab, and then you can put addresses for individual customers. Alternatively, you can assign addresses to groups, or you can, or the customer can do it themselves as they're going through the checkout process, of course. So as with any e-commerce platform that you would expect, going through the checkout flow, you can put in a billing and a shipping address. Now, one of the other functionalities that was brought in not too recently, but recently enough, is the address books. So this is the ability to actually efficiently manage a large number of addresses on any of your individual storefronts. You can add numerous addresses to any number of different address books, and then you can associate those address books with different groups, such as departments or customer roles. So what this setup does is it ensures that customers only have access to the addresses you want to grant them, but it means that you can assign multiple addresses at once. So you don't just have to give them a very slowly created list of addresses and then review it for every individual user. You could just, if you need to edit an address book, you can do it in one operation for all users that have it. Now, address books are set up within their own section within Infigo. And it comes in two different sections. So there's the creation of the different address books themselves, and then there's the creation of the customers within those address books. And for both of those, you have the ability to create them manually, or you can import them via CSV. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because we've got a lot of things to go through, but just to show you here, we've got a few sample address books created, and the creation of an address book is basically just give us some information about this book, so a name and a description, and then whether or not it's available for everybody to use or it has to be specifically granted. And then once you've completed those, you can add addresses to that address book. And again, either manually or you can import them via CSV. So they're really easy to populate. And as I mentioned, you can assign those address books to different areas on your Infigo storefront, either individual users, customer roles, or in departments. So I'll take a look at a department as an example. So remember, departments are just groups of customers that are banded together. And within this section, for an individual department, you see there you just have the ability to assign an address book. And what that means is that any customer that's in that department will instantly get access to all of the addresses in that address book. How that looks on the front end. So if I just proceed through my initial part of my checkout, just to show this, the customer will have the ability to actually search through the addresses that are available to them. So you can see here they have a little drop down. They can either see a list of all of the addresses available to them, or they can search for an address that they want to utilize as well. Okay, so that's all I want to say on address books for now. The next thing is to actually start to look at sort of shipping and delivery a bit more. So shipping and delivery, you might have heard them used kind of interchangeably when we talk about Infigo. That's because how you will see that in your platform will depend on the region you're in. So if you're based in the UK or based in Europe, your settings will probably have delivery written in there. However, if you're in the US, where delivery isn't really used as much as a term, shipping is what you'll see as the relevant settings. So the first thing is inbuilt delivery or shipping methods. So Infigo's inbuilt methods provide administrators with really flexible options to define shipping costs. And primarily this is through either fixed price or price by weight configurations. So both of those names are fairly self-explanatory, but if I go to delivery, let's just go through the different delivery options that we have available. So we've got delivery settings. See if there's anything actually useful to show you in this particular one. Maybe not. Let's go to delivery computation. So you see here that we have fixed rate shipping. We have shipping by weight. And then we have a few other different things available in here as well. A few of them are sort of standard plugins that will provide you, allowing you to connect to specific carriers. And then something I'll come on to a little bit is our Easy Post plugin as well, but I'll get to that next. Just taking a look at fixed rate shipping and shipping by weight. Fixed rate, so basically you create a few different categories for your shipping. By default, your Infigo platform will have a first class and a second class in there, just to give you an example of it, basically. And then with fixed rate shipping, you're just assigning a price next to each of those selections. And it won't change based on how much they purchase, quantity, cost, whatever else. It is fixed rate, as the name suggests. So you're just assigning a price. The other option, which is a little bit more complex, but still quite easy to configure, is shipping by weight. So if I just go down to this section, go to configure, and you can see I've put a couple of examples in there already. Maybe this storefront, by the way, might not be the tidiest you've ever seen. I've just tried to enable a lot of things for demonstration purposes on this webinar. So we'll give you an understanding, although it's not massively refined. So what you'll find is that we can create different tiers and different rates for different weight limits. And if you have a weight limit on a particular delivery option that you want to provide, you can create let's say, like for example, a delivery option shipped by weight. You say order weight from and order weight to, and then you can say either an absolute value for that delivery cost, or you can give it a percentage of the order subtotal. That will give you it between those weight limits, and then you can just repeat the process and create it again for a different weight limit. So the cost would increase or decrease based on the weight of the total order. Now, obviously, this gets paired with the fact that you have to provide weight information about your products. Now, this is quite easy to do. The first thing I'll mention is actually getting the units of your platform into the units that you want. So there is, if you type in measure, you should be able to get to either measure weights or measure dimensions. And that will just allow you to pick the units that you want to utilize. And then to actually assign weights or dimensional information to your actual products, if we locate that product in the product management, go to its product variant settings, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with by this point. Scroll down a little and you'll see there we have a section for weight. And then that will use that as in the calculation for the total weight of the order. And then subsequently, if you're using pricing, delivery pricing by weight, it'll take that into consideration as well. Now, I did mention the Easy Post plugin. So the Easy Post plugin is an additional paid module for Infigo, and it streamlines the shipping process by providing access to a wide range of delivery providers through just one single integration. So rather than having all these different potential providers or different methods that we need to configure, if we integrate with the Easy Post platform, it means that you can provide multiple different carriers using that one integration. So it acts as an intermediary integrator. Easy Post eliminates the need to build individual plugins for each carrier, as we have done for some of these, by handling all ongoing communications with them. The plugin serves two main purposes, really. So it allows you to fetch real-time shipping rates during the checkout process, and that uses Easy Post's Rates API. So that will take into consideration things like obviously where the shipment is coming from, where it's going to, all those things will be factored in, and then the live pricing from the actual carriers themselves. And it can also be used to actually creating shipments with the corresponding shipping labels, and that's done via Easy Post's Shipments API. So this integration doesn't only simplify obtaining shipping costs and labels, but it also automatically returns tracking details as well. So that allows for sort of quicker order handling and more efficient order handling. Now, the actual configuration, not going to lie, it can be a little bit fiddly to set up to begin with, just because there's a lot of things to consider as you're setting up your Easy Post configuration. But if I just go to show you the kind of settings that are available. So I'm just going to go and configure my Easy Post configuration. Primarily what you're doing is just feeding connection details between the two. So you'll have an API key, and you can use a test environment in here as well if you want to utilize test. Then you've got things such as the ability to implement additional shipping fees. You can specify whether orders are created or labels are created automatically when an order is placed or whether they're done manually. Loads of different things, such as selecting the available providers and available rates and all that kind of stuff. How that actually appears to the end user. So again, if I go and continue through my checkout process, it just includes it within the delivery selection screen as part of their checkout process. So you see, in this case, it's taking a little bit longer to actually proceed to that step, as you might normally have seen. And that is simply because we're requesting that information from EasyPost for all of those shipping bits of information. Now, As I say, I've not configured this with a massive amount of grace. So we're seeing a lot of different options available and a lot of different pricing, but you can see the kind of things that are available. So I've got a few options up here, which are my basic pricing options, so my basic delivery, which we discussed earlier on, and then all of these subsequent ones, which have been drawn in from or via EasyPost. So for the customer, there's no change. They just select the one they want to use and proceed through the checkout process. What that will do, so I've completed a previous order here, that will actually go and send that via the API into EasyPost. If you've configured it to do so, it will create a label, and then it will actually send that any relevant information back into Infigo as well. So if I have a look in my shared print operations, which again we'll get to a bit later on, let me just go to storefront. You can see there in the status, we've got entries related to shipment created. And then I've also got these tracking numbers, which have been fed back into Infigo from EasyPost. Right. It's going to move on so we get through all the topics. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is delivery restrictions and production restrictions. So some of you may have noticed as I was proceeding through this step, and again, not very gracefully configured, but it gets the point across, is at the bottom here, I've got the ability to show when that order is going to be dispatched, when it's going to be delivered. You can see this in multiple different places. So from the end user side of things, you might have a countdown on the actual product itself to show when they need to order by for it to be delivered by a certain date. So we should be able to see that on here. Or of course, you want to be able to track that within your admin side of things as well. So you want to know when the package should be dispatched by and when it should be delivered by. And you need to control this kind of information via these production or delivery restrictions. They're both kind of similar. You're giving the ability, well, you're giving different methods of offset, essentially. So you're specifying if a certain product has a certain production restriction applied, maybe that product has a lead time of 3 days, and maybe that lead time should not include weekends. So we need to consider that automatically so that the information that gets fed to the user and gets fed into our system is correct in terms of when they can expect their order. So if I find one of those, let's go to production restrictions. You can see I've created a basic example here. And what we're looking at is really quite simple. So you're specifying a deadline hour if it's a production restriction. So they need to order before this time to get the benefit of the 2 days, for example. Otherwise, it'll be another day pushed back. And then you can specify if there's offset tiers. So if a certain quantity will change the offset, or you can specify if certain days should not be taken into consideration as well. Delivery restrictions are very, very similar to this. And then on both of them, you also have the ability to put a calendar in there as well. So this is very useful if there's additional days in which either delivery or production is not going to happen and need to automatically be considered. So let's say you're not working certain holidays or something like that, you can consider those. Those are created very simply, and I won't go through it in detail, in the Manage Calendars section. And you're just selecting days that you don't want to include. Okay, so where those are applied, production restrictions are applied within the products themselves, or you can apply them to a group, for example. So in the product variant settings, you can specify the production restrictions. And then the delivery restrictions will be applied on the different delivery methods, like we discussed earlier on. Okay, let's just check my list, see if I've skipped anything. Okay, I think that's about covered what I wanted to do on shipping and delivery. If there's any immediate questions, please just fire those in and let's have a little look. Ooh, very good question about these selectable production methods. Duncan might have a different answer, but I don't think at present it's possible to have different production methods for a different product, or how to have them selectable. I think at the moment it's specified as one production method per product, one production restriction per product, sorry. If local deliveries are set for only Tuesdays and Thursdays, how do you show those days to be the only choices? Oh, that's a good question as well. Okay, so one thing you could do with that, I suppose, is... Oh, hang on. Yeah. So you do have the ability somewhere to add a calendar. I can't remember where it is off the top of my head, but you can put a calendar on there. So during the checkout process, a customer can pick when they want the delivery date to be, for example. In terms of making it so it's only Tuesdays and Thursdays, you could have it so that the production restriction or the delivery restriction skips every day apart from Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is just me thinking about it off the top of my head right now. If you've got anything else to add, Duncan, I'd be good. But for now, I might take another look at that after the webinar, see if I can find any additional information. Okay. Right, so what I want to talk about next is about configuring payment options and taxation. I want to start off with basic taxation methods. So it allows for, like, when we're talking basic taxation, it allows for comprehensive management of taxes across multiple storefronts via global and individual platform settings. Administrators can create and adjust tax categories. They can configure fixed tax rates if that's applicable to where you are in the world. And you can apply those taxes to both products, and you can apply them to other areas or other fees as well. So if your delivery charges are taxed, you can put them on there. If your handling fees that you might have applied are taxed, you can put it on there as well. So you can apply the taxes to different places. So if I just search for tax, I'll go on my tax settings to begin with. Now, this is just sort of there's obviously a lot of settings here. We're not going to go through those all, but just to give you an overview of what kind of things are on here. So you have the ability to change how taxes are displayed on your storefront. So some countries might want taxes to just be included in the product by default. You don't need to say that taxes are included, it's just assumed. You might get others where tax is excluded and you need to say so, or you don't need to say so. A lot of those options will be found on the tax settings here. You've also got the ability to specify what the tax is based on. So the tax address, where it's actually calculating the tax from, whether it's billing address, shipping address, or a default address if applicable, which is just by default going to use an address which you put into this screen here and no others. And then coming further down, you have the ability to specify whether tax applies to other things other than the product pricing. So this is where you can say, are we going to be taxing delivery? Or are we going to be taxing processing fees on payment methods, or handling and processing fees, which I'll get onto a bit later on. So you can specify whether they need to be taxed as well. Okay, so if I go to tax categories next, this is just where we can create different bands of tax, essentially. So we're not actually deciding what to do with them here. What we actually do with these bands will be decided by the tax methods we utilize, just to make it nice and confusing. But we do create the tax categories as a way of assigning different things to different places. So you might have a tax category which is to do with shipping, or you might have a tax category which is to do with shipping to a certain place, for example. And creating one of those is nice and easy. It is just add new, add a name, and say where it is in the list. We're not deciding anything else at this stage. If I then go to tax providers, now this is where we actually configure where these taxes are used and where those categories are used and what the rates are going to be that are applied to them. So we do have a couple of external plugins to external tax calculation providers. I'll get onto those in a moment. However, what I'm focusing on in this section more is the basic ones. So we have these fixed rates tax, and we have tax by country and state and zip if you need to apply a certain tax rate to a certain location. So they're both pretty easy to specify. First off, you need to specify which sort of taxation method you want to use as your primary source. Go to configure. And then if it's the basic fixed tax provider, you can just assign a different tax band to the different categories. If you're on tax by country or state or any other place, you're just adding a bit more information really. So you're specifying whether it's a country, whether it's a region within the country, whether it's a certain postcode, associating that with a particular category, and then you're saying what that percentage of taxation is going to be. Now that's just setting up the actual tax bands. We need to still apply the taxation to the products as well. That is another thing which is done on a product by product basis. So if I go to my product management again, back to my product variant settings, scroll down a little bit and you see we have the ability to select one or multiple different tax bands for this particular product. So you are applying this on a product by product basis or a product group if that's relevant as well. Okay, the next thing to mention here is about tax plugins. So we do have, well, for those where taxation, we're in a nation where taxation is a little bit more complicated, and the US is the one that jumps to mind just due to all the different states you have to deal with. We do have integrations with Avatax, which I think is how you pronounce that, maybe Avatax, and TaxJar as well. And those plugins work. So if I go to tax providers, you see there we've got TaxJar and Avalara Avatax. I think Avalara is the one I've set up, so I'll go to configure. And you see we just put in some authentication details. There's other details further down, which I'll keep hidden for the purposes of this, just in case they identify anything. And then that's just using that third-party service. So when you actually create your basket and start proceeding through the checkout, it sends all that relevant information to Avatax based on source location, based on destination location, and will feed that live tax rate back to you. You've also got the ability in here to specify a default tax rate. So if it fails for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that there'll be no tax added. You can specify what that default fallback rate is going to be. Now, in terms of what the actual end user will see, it's nothing groundbreaking because it's just seamlessly integrated into the workflow. So you'll see here, for example, that I have, it's labeled VAT here, so value added tax. And I appreciate it's called other things in different countries. But if I start updating those values, you can see that value gets updated as well. And that is a live feed where the information is getting sent to the third-party platform and then being received back and updated. And because that's their bread and butter, that's their specialism, you know, if you've configured their platform right, that's what you're going to get. All right. I appreciate I'm proceeding through these quite quickly, but just as a reminder, that page I gave you does have links to additional content if you want more information on any of these. And another reminder, do put any questions in there that you have. We're happy to answer those. Right, so payment methods. Okay, so we'll start off with some what I'm going to call core payment methods. So these are the ones that don't require integrations with third parties. And obviously, in the vast majority of cases within Infigo storefronts, I'd say third-party integrations are utilized, especially if you need to take live payment on the storefront. However, in terms of the core payment options, these include things such as purchase order, which will be the one that's active on your platform by default. You've also got options in there which are cash on delivery. You've got check or money order, and you've got no payment in there as well. So there's a few default ones in there. Some of them are best just used for testing purposes. Some of them are quite specific and niche for specific scenarios. Just focusing on purchase order, as that's definitely the most commonly used core option. So what you'll see if we go to configure our purchase order is, when the page loads, is a few additional options in there. And this is just kind of what you want to show as part of that checkout flow, really. So what you want to do with a particular order once it's placed. So for example, by default, if you're using purchase order, when that order's gone through, it will be marked as paid, but you can specify it to be marked as unpaid. You can say whether it's compulsory or optional to put in a purchase order, whether there's an additional fee that should be added on top of the order for processing a purchase order. Remember that each of these payment options do have additional configuration options as well. So you can fine-tune their requirements if you need to. And then, of course, we have the payment plugins. Now, you'll see there we have a long list of available payment plugins. I'd say the most commonly used ones from my point of view are Stripe, or probably is Stripe, maybe, yeah, definitely Stripe, I'd say. But they all work in a relatively similar way. You're just connecting, the long and short of it is you're connecting your existing account information with that provider into your Infigo platform. So you'll need to put in the relevant credentials and link up the relevant settings, and then it will just work as part of the checkout flow. So if the customer has the ability to select between different payment options, they'll get the payment screen and they'll have the ability to select if they want purchase order or pay now or whatever, and then you'll get the relevant follow-up screen. However, if you've just got pay by card or pay by Stripe or whatever, you'll skip that initial screen because there's only one option, and it will just go straight to the taking payment screen. So it's all a smooth checkout process for your customer. Okay, so again, you can see it's got some just specific configuration settings, but primarily what you're looking for is the ability to link to your existing provider account. And that's kind of a common theme for every one of these third-party integrations. But we're not going to go through all of these individually, just due to time constraints. Okay, next section, just let me have a quick drink. Sorry about that. So the next section is about configuring email accounts and associated email templates. So it's obviously a very important part of the e-commerce process is the ability to communicate with your customers. You need that ability to push information out to them. Now, when you get your initial Infigo platform, you do have a basic mailbox set up on there that we provide. So it will be your company at infigomail.net. That will be configured automatically so that you can send and receive emails. However, that's not designed to be a sort of permanent solution. That's more designed to be whilst you're getting to grips with the platform and whilst you're getting initially configured. What we would expect is that eventually you put your own mailbox on there that can handle the content you want. So if I go to email accounts, now what you can do is it's your choice whether you set these up. And this applies to the vast majority of things I think I'm talking about on this webinar. This is one of the rare instances where you can set a lot of things up on the platform level if you want them to be globally available on all your storefronts, or you can set them up on storefront level. Now, obviously, it's a bit more granular than that. Some things you might be able to do platform, some you might not. But generally speaking, a lot of these can be done on either. An email account is a good example of that. So the one we set up for you by default will be on the platform level. So this means that you can send and receive email or send emails from all of your storefronts that you create. However, if you need mailboxes for each individual storefront, so let's say the mailbox has an email address which is relevant to that storefront name, then you can set them up on a storefront level as well. The details you need are quite straightforward. As you can see there, it's just email address, you need credential information, ports, and a host. And then once you've got that information, easiest thing to do is just to send a quick email test. That will tell you if it's been successfully sent from the Infigo side of things, and it will also actually send you a quick email as well. The shortest email you'll ever receive, just saying email works fine. And if you receive that, you know everything's good. Okay, following on from that is the message queue, and I'll get onto email message templates after that. But the message queue is good for verifying what's been sent out, what's not been sent out, what content has actually been sent out in emails, and just keeping a track of everything. So it's a bit more lesser known, to be honest. I think I went through it in a previous webinar. But if you search for message queue, that will show you all of the emails. And it seems I do have a send issue, which I need to look into. So it's good I came onto this page. But that will allow you to basically filter between different emails. And then you also have the ability to click on any of these individual emails as well, just to actually see what that content was. You can resend it if you need to. Let me see what's going on here. Oh, these are just test orders I put in. I mustn't have configured it correctly. But you can see there the information that's gone out as part of that email. This is especially useful because when you're creating your message templates, as we'll see in a moment, you might have sort of placeholder information in a lot of different places. So things such as the customer's name or the products they've purchased or the address it's been sent to. It's all going to be just placeholders waiting for dynamic information to be sent to the customer. Whereas within the message queue, you can actually see if that's been populated correctly, what information has been sent, and just keep a track of it. It will also give you more information as to what the problem was with sending, if there was one, and gives you the ability to requeue to resend if you need to as well. So for example, if you have a bunch of emails that haven't sent, you could fix your inbox or fix your message account for whatever reason, and then just requeue those emails to be resent with the exact same content. Okay, next section is the email message templates. Now, what you'll find is that there's a few of these activated by default on new platforms and new storefronts. Things just what we probably consider critical. So password recovery, I think this is probably the default configuration, to be honest. So password recovery, probably some to do with orders. So abandoned cart, order cancelled, order placed, order paid, that kind of thing. But you'll see that there's a lot more templates available as well. And these try to account for pretty much any scenario in which you're going to want to send an email. And we provide you with some very basic templates just to get you started with some placeholder information in there. However, you have got full customization of these emails. So for example, if I go to my order paid or order placed, let's go for order paid, which goes to the customer. It gives you a little indication of when that email will actually be triggered. And then you've got the column here, which is showing you whether that particular template is enabled. And you can enable or disable them using edit. And then scrolling down, it gives you some information on the content of that particular email. Now, if you're not particularly skilled, as I'm not, at writing the content of emails in this particular way using code, then we do allow you to utilize the content template functionality to create your email templates as well. A caveat with this is it's not quite as customizable as the content templates for your main site, just due to the inherent difficulties around website email HTML. However, you have got customization in terms of things like logo and text content and various other pieces. So if I switch from Code Mirror Editor to Content Template Editor, you can see there I can choose my email template, and then I can put in the crucial bits of information for that email. So things like a logo, what my title is going to be, what my content's going to be, and we can select what additional details we want there as well from a pre-configured list. So whether it's things like order details, so that will be drawn into the email automatically, password recovery, and various other specific scenarios. Please do note all of the tags or tokens over on the right-hand side as well. So these cover all these different forms of specific dynamic information that might be from your specific customer, your specific storefront, that specific order. And you can just copy and paste any of those into the content of your email, and it will include them in that email template. Those tokens can be used in the Code Mirror Editor as well. You're not just limited to using those in the content templates. Right, I think we might get through this on time, you know. So the next section I want to talk about is managing jobs using shared print operations and hot folders. So I know many of you that are on this call might have a integration with an MIS. Now, that's obviously a little bit different than what we have here, and I will sort of very briefly go over those in a moment. But within the Infigo platform itself, as I've kind of briefly shown earlier on, we do have an area called shared print operations. So this is very useful if you are part of a company that doesn't use a separate MIS or doesn't integrate with Infigo with that MIS, just for tracking your orders, getting hold of your artwork, updating statuses, putting notes on orders, that kind of things. Shared print operations is fantastic for that. So it's fairly straightforward to use once you get your head around it. If I go to shared print operations, by default, that will show you orders from all of the storefronts on your platform, because it's kind of just like a central hub for all your print jobs. Every row that you see in there, if I find one that actually has a row, let me just go to an individual storefront so we're not seeing loads of extra stuff. Every single row is a job, because you might have multiple jobs within a single order. So a job might be you want 3,000 of this particular document, but on the same order, you might have another 2,000 of a different document or something like that. So each row in here is a job. Each one of those you can expand, and then you've got a full range of potential information that a print operator, for example, is going to need. Shipping address, billing address, whether they need to contact the customer, if there's an associated product with it. So this particular product I'm using, I think, is a stock product, so it's not particularly useful in that respect. However, if you're doing a static PDF or a multi-part product where the customer's uploaded their PDF, you'll be able to download the artwork from in here. You can also do things such as downloading associated job tickets, invoices, associated documentation, shipping and tracking information, and of course, status changes. So you can keep track of what's happening with that particular order. Now, for those that don't have the integration with an MIS, this pairs very nicely with hot folders. So this is, excuse me. So this is the ability for us to actually automatically push artwork to particular folders. The easiest way to think about this is hot folders are actually created within your Infigo platform. And when you're pushing a job to a hot folder, it is pushing it to a folder within your Infigo platform. But what you would have is an additional little installation tool, which is called Infigo Sync. You can put that on a remote machine, and you can very easily connect Infigo Sync to poll to keep looking into one of those hot folders on your Infigo system. And when it sees that there's been a change in files, when it sees that there's been an update, it will get that information and copy it onto the local file of that, a local folder of that machine that Infigo Sync is installed on. So again, once you get your head around these, it's fairly simple to set them up. It's just a case of creating the relevant hot folders and then choosing how you want to map them. So you can just have everything go into one hot folder if you want to, but you might have it so that certain products go to certain hot folders because they need to be printed on certain machines, for example. So you might need to direct them in certain places. It can get a bit complicated depending on your setup. So if I go to hot folders and print locations, now a print location is just, as the name suggests, it's a location in which you're doing the print. So it might be sort of facility 1, facility 2, whatever it might be. And then within those, you can have multiple different hot folders. Creating them is very, very easy. You're just giving them a name, and then you're saying whether they're active, and if you need to, whether they're visible to the API as well. The most important thing to do here is to actually specify what the mapping for that hot folder is going to be. So which products of my orders are going to go to that particular hot folder. So if I go to one of these and say edit mapping, you can specify there a load of different potential options, a load of ways in which files can get pushed to that particular hot folder. So it could be specific products, it could be whole categories, it could be if the order's from a certain country, if a certain product tag is used, for example. There's loads of different ways in which you can categorize that. Or of course, you can just leave it so that it doesn't utilize any specific mapping at all and everything gets pushed to one particular hot folder. You can utilize multiple hot folders for the same product. And it kind of works on a best matching scenario. So if something is present in the mapping of a couple of hot folders, it will go towards what it considers to be the best match as to which hot folder it eventually goes to. Okay, and what you should see on Infigo, on these shared print operations, I don't think it will be working on this particular example, but you will get an update when something has gone to a particular hot folder. So you can make sure that it's doing the right thing. So I won't do it on this one, I don't think, because I've got other configurations specified for example purposes. But as part of the status history, you will see that it's been sent to hot folder or verified within the hot folder. And then there'll be another section here as well, which is saying what hot folder it's been pushed to. So you can utilize that if you're not integrating with an MIS. Another way to manage your orders is with the sales section, which is a bit less talked about. So this will probably not what you would use for sort of the general print operator or anything. It will have financial information in here. It will have the ability to provide refunds if you're doing so. But it does give you a lot of the same information that shared print operations does. So you'll see here that I've got details on all of the orders that have been placed into this particular storefront. And then you can go into more details on any of those orders. Download associated documentation or change the status of that job if you need to as well. Okay. Let's keep an eye on the time. I think we're good. So very, very briefly talk about MIS plugins. Now, this is going to be brief, so sorry if you have been waiting for this section, but there's so many different plugins. We have to so many different providers. So we can't go through them all in a lot of detail. But fundamentally, what they're all doing is allowing you to push your order information and artwork into your whatever your third-party provider is. So if I go to Connect Plugins, now you will not have a list probably anywhere near as long as this. I've got a lot enabled on my little training platform here. But it does show the kind of scope of the kind of things which we have worked on, even if they're not all immediately available. So this is things like integrating with PrintIQ is a big one. We do Tharston, Vericore, Label Tracks, CERM. Those are ones that have warranted having their own personalized integration being made. Now, they do all have their own unique capabilities based on what that platform allows and how it does things. So, for example, PrintIQ has a product sync. So you can actually get products to sync back into Infigo or vice versa. Whereas some of the other integrations might not have that because they don't allow it. But fundamentally, what they're doing is allowing you to push order information into that MIS so you can manage it from there. Might include your artwork. And then in the vast majority of cases, you can get status updates back into Infigo via webhook as well. So you don't have to just manually update everything. And then, of course, when the status is updated back in Infigo, it has a knock-on effect where that can update the customer if you want it to as well. So it can trigger an email, for example. Now, the configuration is different but the same for all of these different integrations. What you're doing again is providing credentials so you can link your two systems, and there's associated settings based on that particular integration as to whether you want to do things or not do things. But then what you're doing in many cases is making sure that you've linked certain scenarios within Infigo into certain scenarios within your MIS. So, for example, this might be, I have a certain product with certain attribute specifications. This links to a certain product specification, which is in PrintIQ, for example, and you need to marry them together. And what we're looking for in this case is a button which you'll see in quite a few different places because you can link quite a few things, is a green Connect Link button. So I can go to my product management, for example. I remember where it is. It's on the variant. There we go. So I've gone to my product variant, and you can see there's this green Connect link. And what that allows you to do, generally speaking, is to relate the area you just clicked Connect Link for. So in this case, that particular product, you can put in an external ID to link to something equivalent on your MIS. Now, depending on the integration, you might be able to do a lot more or a lot less in this particular window. But fundamentally, that's what you're doing. You're linking up those scenarios. Okay, a lot of those MIS systems the integrations we provide, at least, do have documentation on the Academy. So you can find those if you need to, or if you're struggling to set one up or you want more information on a particular integration, give us a shout and we can try and help you out. Two more very quick things to mention before we finish. We've got a few minutes left. One is additional fees. Now, this is something that was introduced, again, relatively recently. And now that I'm mid-conversation, I completely forgotten where they are specified, which is fantastic. But we do have the ability to specify sort of processing and handling fees that you want to appear on the order. And some of them might be per order line, some of them might be per order, but it means you can just put some additional cost in there. You can still make it visible to the customer, of course, and it can be taxable. You can incorporate those into your order. Let me just try a couple of places it might be before I give up. Where are we? Order. There you go. Order settings, processing and handling fees, and then you have these three entries here. So order processing fee, job handling fee, and product handling fee. And there's a Academy resource on that as well. So the final thing is adding scripts to pages. Now, the example I've got for this is the actual Academy page itself. So this might be where you want to, it might be useful in cases where you want to provide a live chat or help or a support icon or a contact form or something like that, which is constantly available on the page, or other scenarios where you want scripts to just run in every page on your site. So on the Academy, for example, on the bottom right, you have the ability to directly put in a support ticket. And this is just running this script on every single page. Now, I'm just going to show you where to put that in. You can normally get the script itself from the third-party provider. So you'll just get a code snippet, which you copy and paste. If I just go to, let me do this on my own test storefront. I think that's Infigo settings. And then scroll down. And you've got these sections here. You've got page head container and page footer container. Now, I haven't shown where this actually is on the Academy because it has a unique identifying key, which I probably shouldn't show. But this is the location you would put that code snippet from your third-party provider. And then it would appear on every page. Okay, I think that is about me done for this particular webinar. So I do hope that's been useful for everybody. If you do have any remaining questions, please do feel free to fire them into the chat. Or if we're missing anything that you want to know about, please let us know as well. If we can't answer it now, I can point you towards some resources or make some for you on particular topics related to e-commerce. All that's left to be said is thank you very much for attending and for listening. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see you at the next webinar in about a month's time.